Well, as we edge closer to the start of Her Majesty's funeral, we're reflecting on what a momentous week it's been for the royal family and also for all of us watching on around the world. Journalist and author Nick Bryant is here at the desk with us tonight. Nick, good to see you. So much to talk to you about throughout the evening, but very few cities in the world can mount something like what's about to unfold before our eyes tonight. Is it ready for this in terms of the security, the logistics?
It's the biggest security operation that Britain has ever seen on its soil. More than 10,000 uniformed officers, more than 4,000 plainclothes officers mingling with the crowd. You've got aerial surveillance drones. You've got the MI5 and MI6 trying to spot terror threats. You've got local bobbies, people in communities who are knocking on the doors of what's called fixated people, people with an unhealthy obsession about the monarchy, just making sure they're where they should be and
right?
they're okay.
Checking in on them today. Do they watch them then?
Checking in on them, keeping tabs on them. They've got a list of people who over the years they've identified as posing a threat. And that's all part of this massive threat matrix. And they've also learnt from the Olympics in 2012. And one of the things they learned was it's far easier to stick international leaders in a few buses and coaches rather than protect lots and lots of different limousines. So that's what's happening, apart from the very, very important people like Joe Biden, who obviously is taking the beast to the funeral. But it's an interesting challenge as well, because they've got to protect the crowd from the crowd. There are so many people there, they're worried about crushing. So what they've come up with is this really sort of complicated system where some tube stations are exit tube stations, some tube stations are entrance tube stations. So many different things to think about and so many different layers of this massive security operation.
Well, what's James Bond's role at this point? Is he... No, not involved?
Well, Daniel Craig be dropping from a helicopter into the midst of that. Perhaps that's the surprise that's to come. There is a James Bond-like operations centre. I think that's fascinating. We're going to... somewhere in southwest London, there is this kind of room with all the screens. They apparently meet twice every hour just to reassess the threat. The terror threat level at the moment is substantial. That means to say a terror threat is likely. But there are a couple of levels above that, and significantly the threat level hasn't changed since the death of Queen Elizabeth.
But that room you're talking about, is that where they need a sniper to do something? Is that where they'll make those sorts of calls? Or do these people just make their own decisions? How does the coordination work?
What is the chain of command in those sort of situations? I honestly don't know.
Sorry, it's unfair of me to expect that.
Well, no, I mean, it's not the sort of thing that the police sort of let you in on. But it's fascinating to think there is this sort of operations centre that is kind of like
a situation room.
Stuff we see in the movies.
Speaking of security, can we talk about the Crown for a second? I had the pleasure of seeing it in real life when we were over in London a few months ago, and it is extraordinary. Like, I was looking at how it's got, I think, 2,800 diamonds in it, 17 sapphires, 11 emeralds, pearls that go on and on and on, 4 rubies. It weighs over 1 kilogram, this crown. But you were saying an interesting fact about how quickly they need to take it off to then put it back.
So you'll notice throughout all of this that the crown sits atop the coffin, which is on the carriage, and that will be there for the duration of this, because we'll see everything unfold at Westminster Abbey. The coffin will then be taken ultimately to Windsor Castle, then to St George's Chapel, which is there. There's another funeral ceremony with 800 people, including the household staff, and then a smaller private service for just the family. But in amongst that, before the coffin is lowered into the crypt, the Queen's jeweller, the royal jeweller, will have to step in and remove the crown just before the coffin is lowered and take it away to the Tower of London.
And there's an awful lot of bling there. I mean, more than $1 billion worth.
Really?
I mean, there's one jewel alone. It's called the Cullinan 1. Because the Cullinan 2 is on the crown. This one's on the sceptre. That alone is worth $400 million. And the crown is so heavy that in her later years, the Queen couldn't even wear it because it was just too heavy for her. And those jewels are also very rich in symbolism. The sceptre signifies the Queen's governance and power. The orb with a cross on it says that she is divinely ordained, that she is God's representative on earth. That's the symbolism of it. And obviously, for many people around the world, you know, those crown jewels are very contentious as well. I mean, a lot of them are packed with jewels from former colonies. And although at the time many of them were gifts to the monarchy, you know, in the week or so since the Queen's death, a lot of people in former colonies have been saying we should get those jewels back.
And yet, for all of that, we're now seeing dignitaries arriving at Westminster Abbey from many of those former colonies. I mean, it sort of speaks to, I suppose, the power of this one woman, that for all of that history, messy as it is, they're still all arriving to say goodbye.
I think one of the most extraordinary achievements of the Queen is to keep the Commonwealth together, this extraordinary 56-nation family that she has really been at the heart of. She did become the post-imperial Queen, the post-imperial monarch, but she managed to keep the Commonwealth together despite some of the awful things that the British Empire was responsible for. And I think that spoke of her sort of personal magnetism. We speak of the Queen as this figure of continuity, but in Britain and around the Commonwealth, she was also this figure of transcendence.
Which you're kind of seeing now with some of the Caribbean nations saying they might think about becoming a republic
Exactly.
already.
She was the glue that held the Commonwealth together. And, you know, the question is, does Prince Charles have those same adhesive qualities?
It's King Charles to you. It's King Charles.
King Charles.
Yeah, we want to talk about that more later in the show, because I think it's fascinating, your insight on whether you think that will happen or not.
Indeed.
Nick, thanks very much.
Yes.